So just a quick heads up before we get to the video. Now either sometime just before this video goes up, or maybe even sometime just after this video goes up, personal life stuff I will not explain, I will be putting up for sale a bunch of 10-minute play scripts from my school days. Now again, because of those things I'm not getting into, I don't know when exactly I will have them up on the digital storefronts that I'm planning, so I wasn't sure if I was gonna mention it in the video, but you know, this is the Criterion movies based off of plays, so selling play scripts is just too relevant to the topic to ignore. So again, check the description, because no matter when they're up, I will link them, and the plan is to put them on Patreon, Ko-fi, Squarespace, and Itch.io, of all places. So as long as all those go through, yeah, you'll be able to buy for about $9.99 is the plan, 5 play scripts from when I was in school. Most of those plays even have videos of when they were originally done on my Vimeo, so you can check those out too. So if you're interested, hey, please check them out. And like I said, I don't know which is going up first, the video or the actual scripts, so just check the description and I'll bring you a link to every single one of those storefronts. Enjoy the video. It's good. So I think it's not all that much of a shock that there's plenty pieces of classic theater that were turned into classic movies. In fact, I'm going to call it right here. I'd be surprised if there is a piece of classic theater that has not ever been adapted into a film. You know, theater goes back as one of our earliest forms of storytelling in that regard. Obviously, literature was first and folktales were first, but theater was effectively the first one to add the visual storytelling elements to it. While theater and film are still two different beasts in their own way, in many other ways, it makes perfect sense to adapt a piece of theater into a piece of film. The visual storytelling is already there. You already have the grandiose acting, the fantastic set pieces. In fact, a lot of early filmmaking just kind of copied what worked for theater. It took a little bit for people to realize what was unique about a camera. Now, for what we have today, we don't have much of what necessarily you might be able to call classic theater. There's only one thing based on a Shakespeare play, and even then, it's a bit of a stretch, even though it was also the point. And even with that out of the way, let's just cut to something first that I would consider classic theater. It's not that old a play, especially compared to some of the stuff we will be looking at, but to me, it's still probably one of the best.
Ladies and gentlemen, whether you like it or not.
Ow! Don't you know me, Kansas City? I'm the new Berlin Wall. Try and tear me down.
Hedwig and the Angry Inch is a film I did not even know there was a film for. It's a play I'd seen many years ago, and one that stuck with me immediately, and still does to this day. I can still very vividly recall my experience watching it. It's a play that is set in a bar. The Hedwig and the Angry Inch, the titular characters, is a band, a small-time band with a very long history for the lead singer, Hedwig. Go through her horrifically traumatizing backstory, which is also made darkly funny. How she got here after some minor successes in life that were mostly all downers anyway. It's a very hard-hitting piece, and one that I think can help you open up your heart.
When the earth was still flat and clouds made of fire watch all around them as they talked while they read, and they never knew nothing of love.
As for the movie does a lot of that, but there's still set pieces. There are still places it goes. Again, the play is all set on that one stage inside a small little grungy bar where they happen to be playing. But we see the traveling road shows. We see the other sides to the other band members that we basically didn't really get, because Hedwig is the only one who really talks in the play version. There are some snippets of dialogue with the other band members, but we really don't get to know them as people at all, at least from what I can remember. So the film does have some other sides to it, which is great to help make it a film. Now, I still like the version of the play that I saw better, but you can watch the same play dozens of times, from different outlets and realized that plays can actually be entirely different depending on who is in charge. So that being said, just because my experience with Hedwig and the Angry Inch was better than the film when I finally saw it, this film is so utterly good that I guarantee you it's better than some of the productions have been. I really highly recommend this film. Honestly, probably especially if you don't know the play. But if the play is showing in your area, maybe go see if there's some tickets.
Hedwig and the Angry Inch.
When I think about all the people I have come upon in my travels, I have to think about the people who have come upon me.
So this film I will have watched by the time this video goes out. I will make sure to watch it. And that's why the audio will be a bit different, because I'll be talking back into my microphone for that and dubbing it over. And so that being said, I'll basically have to find out what this is actually more based on. Is this based on the play, or is this just based on the Dickens novel? Through Criterion approved DVD, this one's not a Blu-ray, and it is still not on Blu-ray, we have Oliver Twist, directed by David Lean. So now that I have seen the movie, I'm going to take a good guess that it really is based off of the book. To be fully, thoroughly, and transparently honest with you, no, I have not read the book, and when it comes to that musical that I'm so familiar with, I've seen the film version, and it was a long time ago, back in a music class when I was in middle school. But Oliver Twist is such a known classic story that even without reading the book, I know what's in the book, and I know what's in the book that isn't in the musical, and vice versa. Which always makes recommending movies based on such classic literature hard, because I can't tell you, the story's so great, the characters are so great. You already know. I have to tell you what's different about this version, what's compelling about it. And the thing that is compelling about this film is just how completely beautifully it's shot. Yes, the story and the characters are likely just as great as they are in the book, but just the way that this movie looks and feels and moves is so incredible. It's a bit of a slow burner because it's a bit of a longer film, and yet it all feels worth it the entire time. Now, as it is a bit of an older film, I need to be fair with you, there is a controversy with this film that actually even happened when the movie came out, which is Alec Guinness's portrayal of Fagin. If Alec Guinness sounds familiar, hey, that's old Ben Kenobi. And it's really hard to ignore. Well, look at the picture. You can guess why it's controversial. Just straight up, you can guess why this portrayal of Fagin from Oliver Twist was controversial. It is in many ways still a great performance, like all the performances in the film are, but those makeup effects alone, I see why there was a controversy. I will still say I found the movie very thoroughly enjoyable, but since they need to be at least loosely connected to the theme, if you want to pretend I just said arsenic and old lace, sure. That release isn't even out yet, but you can pretend I just said arsenic and old lace, because I'm sure that's going to be a real good release too. So hopefully I didn't put myself into a corner with that, where I have two that don't entirely fit the theme, but do fit the theme. Because as you may remember, Humanity was not a horror film, but it was in the horror film section. And King of Jazz had animated segments, but was not an animated film for the Animated Classics video. And there were definitely enough horror films that if I had looked through Criterion, I wouldn't have had to do Humanity. But I need to talk about that film somehow. And same here. This is a film that you might be like, why aren't you just saving this for a Kurosawa retrospective? You must have a Kurosawa retrospective planned. Oh, I do, don't worry. But I think it's actually best to save it for this video. For it is an adaptation of Macbeth. Controversial statement. I'm not a big Shakespeare person. I don't hate Shakespeare, I think that the storytelling is pretty fine, and the characters are purposefully very weak. It makes sense. It allows the actors to do whatever they want with it. And that is actually really what my biggest problem is. I don't think I've really disliked watching a Shakespeare play. Maybe it has happened, but I've seen enough stuff that some stuff you just kind of forget about. But I've definitely hated reading Shakespeare's literature, because it's not. Plays are not literature, but for some reason, Shakespeare's play scripts are read in schools as if they are classic literature. And for God's sakes, can we stop doing that? Because I did read Macbeth for a school assignment all the way up to college. And honestly, I didn't think the story was all that bad, but I was thoroughly bored by having to try to read it and try to decipher what the hell is going on, because Shakespeare's scripts aren't very good at saying where people actually are or who's in the scene when they're edited to read as if they're classic literature. But watching Shakespeare can be very engaging, especially when you try something very different. And here we have Throne of Blood. The film, I think, is Kurosawa's second best, and one of the absolute best performances from Toshiro Mifune. I love Seven Samurai. It's one of my all-time favorites. Before this came around, my second favorite of his was Yojimbo, and I love Sanjiro basically as much as Yojimbo in all seriousness, but we'll talk about those films in a Kurosawa retrospective. And if you just want a spoiler, the fourth film's either going to be Rashomon or Dreams. I haven't seen Dreams yet, but I want a copy of it. That's why I wanted to talk about Throne of Blood now. Throne of Blood takes the simple yet engaging story of Macbeth and lets Toshiro Mifune do his magical acting work. It's incredibly eerie as a film. It's very cinematic and epic as a film. Some set pieces are beautiful. The witches are worked in very well. There's a reason I'm calling this Kurosawa's second best. And I suppose maybe I will leave discussion on what happens in the film light. Because y'all have read or watched Macbeth already. And it is not all that different. I picked it as the third subversion because, well, have you seen Macbeth as a black and white film featuring samurais in feudal Japan? No, you have not. It also ends on what I personally think is one of the best special effects I've still ever seen. That'll be up to debate, so why don't you go watch it to see if you agree or not. So the way this show has worked on the channel ever since episode 1 is movie 3 is a bit of a subversion, and movie 4 is my favorite out of the 4. And I saved a real big one for 4. Lorraine Hansberry's A Raisin in the Sun is just straight put one of the best pieces of theater that I'd ever read. For everything I just said about Shakespeare, there are some plays you can read just fine. I still won't count them as literature, but I can count them as a really good read. In fact, right here, I did read it as an after-school assignment. It's right here. I loved it enough that I have a physical copy. And of course, I was over the moon when I found out that Criterion got the rights to the film.
What's that he wants to do?
Go carry groceries after school to supermarket.
Well, let him go. It's good for him to be business-minded.
I have to. She won't give me the 50 cents.
Why not?
Because we don't have it.
What do you tell the boy things like that for? Yes, sir.
Remember what I said earlier, how a lot of early film just kind of did what theater did. So, people just statically sitting around, talking to each other and conversing. The camera hardly moves sometimes. And there are some movies that still decide to carry that on later. And the film for Raisin in the Sun, a lot of times feels like they just recorded an incredibly well-acted version of the great play.
That's my boy. You know what I was thinking about in the bathroom this morning?
I know what you was thinking, and I don't want to hear it again.
About what me and Willie Harris was talking about last night.
Willie Harris is a good-for-nothing loudmouth.
Some scenes are cut, and also some scenes are added. And the added scenes do transport us to other locations, so it still feels like a film and not just someone recorded the play who bootlegged A Raisin in the Sun. Incredibly powerful performances and incredibly powerful storytelling. Really just... highlights some issues of social injustice that still prevail, still happen. It's a painful film that has its bright spots, and I won't say much else. And that also goes for the play, but this is one of my favorite films, as well as one of my favorite plays. It's harder to recommend it than that. Throne of Blood, I didn't want to say much because y'all know Macbeth. But with Hedwig, I didn't say much because y'all don't know Hedwig, and I'd rather you see what goes on there. You might know Raisin in the Sun a little bit better, because it is a theater classic. But if you haven't seen the film, here's how you do it.
Still call him a loudmouth whiffer.
Walden.
Oh, Walton.
With everyone. God these cars. I swear, no cars happen when I'm not filming.